The night my brother tried to have me hauled off in front of my own kids, I was standing at the kitchen sink up to my elbows in soapy water, listening to my dad argue with the evening news in the living room, when I saw the blue and red lights flash against the window over the sink and heard the sound of car doors slamming. For a second, I honestly thought there'd been an accident out front. Maybe one of the teenagers down the block finally took that stop sign the way they drive. Then someone pounded on my front door hard enough to rattle the frame, and my 16-year-old, Evan, yelled from upstairs, "Mom, there's cops on the porch." My heart dropped into my stomach. You know that cold, clean fear that hits before your brain has time to make a story? That. I dried my hands on the dish towel and went to the door, wiping my palms down my jeans like a guilty person, even though I knew, absolutely knew, I hadn't done anything wrong. By the time I opened it, there were two uniformed officers on my porch, a woman in scrubs with a clipboard, and an older man with a calm face and a badge clipped to his belt that said something like "Crisis Response." My neighbor's curtains were already twitching. Of course they were. "Ma'am, are you Claire Bennett?" the older officer asked. "Yes," I said, gripping the doorknob. "Is everything okay?" "We got a call requesting a welfare check," the woman in scrubs said. "On you. And your father." "On me," I repeated. "What? Who called?" I didn't need to ask. I knew before the officer even glanced down at his notepad and said, "A family member. Your brother, Daniel Bishop. He reported concerns you may be having some kind of mental health crisis and that your father might not be safe in the home." Behind me, my dad shouted at the TV, "That's not what Reagan said." Completely oblivious. The sound floated down the hallway, the worst possible background track. My face burned. "I am not having a mental health crisis," I said way too fast, which I realized made me sound exactly like someone having a mental health crisis. "My father has Alzheimer's. He lives here with us. He's loud. That's all that is." The man with the badge, later I'd learn his name was Mark, and he was a psychiatric nurse attached to the crisis team, held up a hand, palms out, non-threatening. "Nobody's saying you're guilty of anything," he said. "We're just here to make sure everyone is safe. Your brother said he has reason to believe you're overwhelmed, not sleeping, maybe drinking, and that your dad has been kept in concerning conditions lately. If everything is fine, we'll be out of your hair in a few minutes." "Concerning conditions," I repeated, stunned. "He lives in my guest room and eats better than half the people in this neighborhood." I could already feel my body going into that familiar fight or flight mode it had perfected over 52 years of being my parents' designated responsible one. I wanted to slam the door in their faces. I wanted to scream. Instead, I took a breath and did the thing you're supposed to do when authority shows up at your door. "You can come in," I said, stepping back. "But please be quiet. My dad gets easily confused by new people." As if on cue, Dad shuffled into the hallway in his sweatpants and a plaid shirt buttoned wrong, blinking behind his thick glasses. "Who's this?" he demanded. "Is that the gas man? I told you we don't want any." "Hi, Mr. Bennett," the crisis nurse said gently. "My name's Mark. We're just here to say hello. Make sure you and your daughter are doing okay." Dad squinted at him. "You a cop?" "Not exactly," Mark said. "I work with the hospital." "Then tell him the pills make me pee too much," Dad said. "I'm sick of pissing like a racehorse." The younger officer's mouth twitched. The older one kept his face neutral. I could feel humiliation creeping up my neck, hot and prickly. "Dad, why don't you go sit down?" I said. "I'll be right there." "You always say that," he grumbled, but he shuffled back toward the living room like I knew he would. "Can my son come down?" I asked. I don't want him freaking out upstairs imagining God knows what. "Of course," Mark said. I called up the stairs. "Evan, it's okay. Come down, please." Evan appeared at the top of the stairs in pajama pants and a t-shirt, hair sticking up, eyes wide. "Are we getting raided?" he asked, voice cracking. "No," I said firmly. "These folks are just doing a wellness check. On Grandpa and me." He frowned, glancing at the uniforms. "Because of Uncle Dan?" he said. He called again? The older officer raised his eyebrows. Again. I could have smacked myself. He's been difficult, I said. My brother. Since Dad moved in. He doesn't agree with how I'm managing things. He likes to call people instead of talking to me like an adult. We'll want to talk about that, Mark said gently. But first, can we sit down somewhere and ask you a few questions? Maybe take a quick look around. In that moment, I realized I had a choice. I could let my anger talk, slam every door he'd ever slammed in my face, make a scene my neighbors and my kids would never forget. Or I could do what my therapist of the last year had been trying to teach me. Step out of the script my family had written for me and try a new one. Sure, I said, swallowing hard. Come into the kitchen. It's the only place that doesn't smell like Bengay. I even managed a half laugh. They looked around because of course they did. At the tidy counters, the piles of mail neatly clipped together with sticky notes. The chart on the fridge with Dad's meds and my color-coded work schedule. At the baby gate blocking the stairs, safety, not prison. At the stack of adult diapers discreetly tucked by the pantry. At the 3 framed photos on the wall. My kids at the beach, my husband and me on our 20th anniversary. My dad 10 years younger with his arm around. Daniel. My brother. The golden child. The one who wasn't here. How long has your father been living with you? Mark asked, flipping through his forms. 2 years, I said. Since his neurologist said it wasn't safe for him to be alone anymore. And you're his primary caregiver? Yes. Any paid support? Home health aides. I shook my head. He hates having strangers in the house, I said automatically. Says they steal his socks. That's not unusual with dementia, Mark said. But I asked about paid help because being a full-time caregiver is a lot. On top of work and parenting. How are you sleeping? I shrugged. About as well as anyone who gets up 3 times a night to stop their father from microwaving his slippers. The younger officer chuckled before catching himself. That wasn't a joke, I added. He tried it once. Any substances? Mark asked. Alcohol? Pills not prescribed to you. I have a glass of wine maybe twice a week, I said. And blood pressure meds that are very much prescribed to me. Any thoughts of harming yourself? Or your father? The question stunned me, even though I knew it was standard. No, I said. God, no. I get frustrated. I yell sometimes. I slam cabinets. But I'm not. I would never. My eyes stung. I blinked hard. I moved him in here to keep him safe. Because my brother said he couldn't possibly have Dad at his condo, poor thing, too many stairs, and his wife needs her space. Mark nodded, scribbling something. Your brother mentioned you've been under a lot of stress, he said. He said you've been paranoid, that you think everyone's out to get you, that you accused him of trying to steal from your dad. I laughed, a short, sharp sound. That's because he did, I said. Multiple times. Would you like to see the bank statements? The older officer shifted his weight. Ma'am, why don't you start at the beginning? He said. How did we get from your dad living alone to us on your doorstep tonight? Fair question. Hard story. But if I didn't tell it, Daniel's version would stand. And if there's one thing I've learned about toxic families, it's that silence is their favorite accomplice. So I took a breath, glanced at my son leaning against the doorway with his arms crossed, at my father in the next room yelling at a commercial, at the flashing red and blue lights reflected in my neighbor's window, and said, okay, then we start with my mother dying. My mom died 3.5 years ago of an aneurysm in the middle of the produce aisle at Wegmans. One minute she was complaining to me on the phone about the price of avocados. The next, my dad's panicked voice was on the line, the phone clattering, strangers yelling for someone to call 911. I drove to the hospital so fast I don't remember the ride. She was gone by the time I got there. Tubes and monitors and that awful stillness that doesn't look like sleep no matter how much you want it to. My brother was on a business trip in Seattle. He didn't make it back in time. That became one of his lifelong grievances. How unfair it was that he didn't get to say goodbye, as if grief were a competition he could still win. In the months after Mom died, my dad unraveled in slow motion. At first it was little things. Misplacing his keys, calling my daughter by my name, leaving the stove on. It's grief, everyone said. Of course he's forgetful. They were married 45 years. But it didn't get better. It got worse. He forgot to pay the electric bill. Twice. He showed up at my kids' school on a random Tuesday insisting it was Sunday, and we were late for church. He got lost driving home along a route he'd taken for 30 years. That was the one that broke through my denial. He called me from the side of the road, voice shaking, saying, "I don't know where I am, kiddo. The signs look wrong." I had him hit the OnStar button. They pinged his location. He was 4 miles from his own house, on the same county road as always. His brain had turned familiar into foreign. I helped him find a neurologist. Daniel attended exactly one appointment via FaceTime, propped up against Dad's water glass, chiming in with generic questions from 2 time zones away. When the official diagnosis came, early stage Alzheimer's, my brother sighed heavily and said, Of course this happens now when my career is finally taking off. Like my father's disease was an inconvenient storm rescheduled over his golf game. Mom had been the organizer, the buffer, the one who remembered birthdays and bill due dates, and the fact that you cannot feed Dad sausage after 7 p.m. unless you want to be up all night listening to him curse his acid reflux. Without her, my dad was like a house with the walls blown off. He can't live alone, the neurologist said after Dad forgot he'd already told the man the same story 3 times in one visit. At least not safely. He needs supervision with meds, finances, driving. We'll figure something out, I said. We. Daniel echoed on FaceTime. Claire, I live in Chicago. My place is tiny. I travel half the month. I can't just uproot my life. I work full-time and have 2 teenagers, I said. I can't just uproot my life either. The doctor watched us ping-pong excuses like it was a tennis match. There are options, he said. Assisted living, memory care, in-home aides. It doesn't have to fall on one person. Those places are expensive, Daniel said immediately. Dad would burn through his savings. His savings are for his care, I shot back. That's what they're for. They're for his legacy, Daniel insisted. He wanted to leave us something. He left us life, I said. That's something. We stared at each other through the little screen, 2 middle-aged kids still playing the roles assigned to us in childhood. Me, the dutiful daughter. Him, the aggrieved son. In the end, it wasn't a noble decision or a family meeting that decided things. It was fire. Dad started a small fire in his kitchen trying to fry bacon in a pot of oil he then forgot about. The smoke alarm went off. The neighbor called the fire department. By the time I pulled up, there were 3 trucks and a cluster of onlookers and my father sitting on the front steps with a soot-smeared face, insisting he'd just gone to the bathroom for a minute. The fire chief pulled me aside. "Ma'am," he said, not unkindly, "this can't happen again. Next time it might not be a pan. It might be the whole house. Or him." That night, I sat at my dining table with my husband, Mark, and the kids upstairs and stared at the spreadsheet I'd made, because of course I made a spreadsheet of Dad's income, my work schedule, the cost of in-home aides versus assisted living versus bringing him into our house. "We can't afford full-time help and keep both our jobs," I said. "But if I cut back hours, we might squeak by." Mark rubbed his forehead. "You shouldn't have to do this alone," he said. "Daniel needs to step up." "Daniel thinks stepping up is sending a sympathy card," I said. He already floated the idea of selling Dad's house and investing the money for better returns. Mark grimaced. "That doesn't sound like investing," he said. "That sounds like him wanting a new Tesla." We both knew he wasn't wrong. Mark left the final decision to me, which I both resented and appreciated. That's the thing about being the functional one. People trust you to make the hard calls, even when those calls exhaust you. In the end, I moved Dad in with us. I took a leave of absence from my job as a high school counselor. then came back part-time. We converted the den into a bedroom and installed grab bars in the bathroom. We labeled drawers and cabinets, hid the car keys, bought one of those giant pill organizers that looks like a toddler toy. I created a binder with every document I could think of, power of attorney, which, at Dad's insistence, he'd signed over to me a year earlier, because you're the organized one. Healthcare proxy, bank info, list of medications. I left a copy with the neurologist, another with my lawyer friend, one in our fireproof box. Untidy paperwork is where a lot of elder abuse hides. I wasn't going to give anyone that opening. Daniel flew in for exactly 3 days to help with the transition. He arrived with a rolling suitcase, a designer backpack, and a lot of opinions. "You're making this too institutional," he complained as I labeled Dad's closet shelves. "He's not a child. He forgets where his socks are," I said. "Labels help. You don't have to do everything the doctor says," he said when I showed him the medication chart. "They just want to drug old people into zombies." "They're not drugging him, they're stabilizing him," I said. "If his blood pressure spikes, his risk of stroke goes through the roof. You want him to be lucid enough to complain, don't you?" He rolled his eyes and went outside to smoke, something he'd picked back up for stress that Mom would have lost her mind over. Dad watched him through the window. "Your brother always did have a dramatic streak," he muttered. Then he frowned. "Which one is he again?" My heart clenched. "That's Daniel, Dad," I said gently. "Your youngest." He blinked. "Oh," he said. "Right." Still, when Daniel said, "Maybe I can take Dad for a weekend sometime," I grabbed onto it like a life raft. "That would be great," I said. "He keeps asking about your place. It might be good for both of you." "Yeah, well," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "We'll see how things go." Things, of course, went exactly how anyone who's ever been the designated family caretaker would predict. Daniel flew back to Chicago. Life settled into a new, exhausting normal. Dad paced, wandered, told the same story about the time he met Johnny Cash in the airport. He didn't 6 times a day. I cooked without salt because his cardiologist insisted, did laundry like it was a competitive sport, learned how to coax him into showers without triggering a meltdown. Mark picked up extra hours. The kids learned to lock the bathroom door because Grandpa had a habit of walking in without knocking. Daniel called every couple of weeks, usually when something in his life went wrong. "I got passed over for a promotion," he'd say. "Again. I swear they don't value me." "I'm sorry," I'd say, stirring spaghetti sauce with the phone wedged between my ear and shoulder while Dad shouted from the living room, "Claire, the man on TV is lying." "How's Dad?" Daniel would ask, almost as an afterthought. "Same," I'd say, slipping a little more. "He keeps forgetting Mom is gone. We have that conversation once a week. It's brutal." "Maybe don't remind him," Daniel said. "If he thinks she's at the store, let him. The doctors say reality orientation is better long-term," I said. "And if he asks directly, I'm not going to lie." Daniel sighed, the put-upon martyr. "You always did love rubbing people's noses in reality," he said. "Some of us prefer a little kindness." That was the first red flag I ignored. The second was the money. It started small. "Hey Claire," Dad said I could borrow a little from his savings to cover some unexpected expenses. Daniel texted one day. "Nothing major. I'll pay it back." I checked Dad's account because as POA that's my job, and saw a $1,000 transfer to Daniel's account from 2 days earlier done online. The note said, "Help for Dan." "What expenses?" I asked. "Car," he said. "Lease stuff. You know how it is." I did, in fact, know that Daniel had a habit of leasing cars beyond his means because image matters in his industry. "You can't take money from him without clearing it with me," I said. "That's what power of attorney is for. To keep things transparent and to protect him." "Oh my God, relax," he replied. "It's his money. He offered." Did he understand what he was offering? I shot back. Did he understand the amount, the impact on his care? Daniel left me on read for hours. When he finally replied, it was with a voice message, not text. Cowardly because you can't easily screenshot tone. You've always acted like you own Dad, he said. Like his love is something you earned with your duty or whatever. Newsflash, Claire. He has 2 kids. He's allowed to help me out once in a while. You're not the financial police. I saved the message. I started saving a lot of things. In the months that followed, there were more little withdrawals. $500 here for a flight to come see you guys. That somehow never happened. $300 there for meds my insurance won't cover. Each time when I pushed back, I was the bad guy. You're being so controlling, Daniel would whine. It's like you want to hoard everything until he dies. I want to make sure he can afford a decent memory care facility if we get to that point, I'd snap. Unless you're planning to take him in when he starts wandering at night? That usually shut him up. But it didn't stop him. The third red flag was the call from Adult Protective Services. Ms. Bennett, the woman on the phone said, I'm following up on a report we received about possible neglect of your father. My stomach dropped. Neglect. I repeated. From who? We can't disclose the reporter's identity, she said, which was adorable, because I could hear my brother's voice behind her words. The report mentioned concerns about your father's hygiene, his nutrition, and possible isolation. I laughed, borderline hysterical. He smells like Irish Spring and eats better than my teenagers, I said. And the man has more social life at his senior center 3 days a week than I do. But sure, come inspect my fridge. So she did. She came by, looked in our pantry, checked Dad's room for bed sores and filth that weren't there, examined his bruises, all in logical places like his shins from bumping the coffee table. She watched us interact. She saw my color-coded charts and the notes from his doctors. Off the record, she said on her way out, we get a lot of these when there's conflict over money or power of attorney. You're doing a good job. Don't let this scare you off. What happens to the report? I asked. It gets filed, she said. If we get multiple, we look closer. Try to document everything. Keep receipts. Families can get messy. She did not know how much of an understatement that was. After that, things escalated. Daniel called more often, but never to talk to Dad. Have you thought about selling his house? He'd ask. The market's good. We could put the money somewhere it grows. I'd say. The money is for his care, not our pockets. But couldn't his care include like paying you a salary? He'd say. Most caregivers get something. Seems only fair. Then we could split what's left later. There it was, the actual heart of things. Dad already insisted on paying us rent, I said, which goes into a separate account for his expenses. I'm not taking a caretaker's salary. That feels too icky. Only you would say no to getting paid for your labor on principle, he muttered. This is why you're always tired and broke. This is why Dad trusts me with his life, I shot back. He trusts me too, Daniel said, offended. He's my father. Is that why he keeps asking where you are? I said. That led to a screaming match, which led to 2 weeks of silence, which led to him calling one night, suspiciously calm. Those were always the calls I should have worried about. Look, he said. I've been talking to some people. Lawyers, financial advisors. They say it's not healthy for you to be doing this alone. They say you might be burning out. That can lead to problems. I'm in a support group, I said. I talked to a therapist. I have help. I'm tired, not dangerous. You screamed at me on the phone last time, he said. If you get that way with Dad. I don't, I said. And even if I did, yelling at an able-bodied 50-year-old man who keeps stealing from a vulnerable adult is not the same as abusing said vulnerable adult. You sound unhinged, he said. I'm worried about you. That was the 4th red flag. I didn't realize then that he was starting to build a narrative. Claire is unstable. Claire is overwhelmed. Claire is paranoid and controlling. Claire might be dangerous. I found out exactly how far he'd taken that narrative the night the cops knocked on my door. After I gave them the 2-minute version of everything I just told you, Mark, the crisis nurse, nodded slowly. Do you have any documentation of the financial concerns you mentioned? He asked. Texts, bank records? I almost laughed. Do I have documentation? I said. You picked the wrong woman to mess with on paperwork. I pulled out the binder that had started as a way to keep track of Dad's doctors and slowly become my shield against my own brother. I showed them the POA document with Dad's shaky but still legible signature from before his diagnosis. I showed them the bank statements with Daniel's transfers highlighted and my emails to the bank flagging them. I played the voice message where Daniel accused me of owning Dad and claimed Dad offered money he was in no state to offer. I showed them the letter from Adult Protective Services closing the neglect case as unfounded. They took notes. They exchanged looks. Has your brother ever been physically threatening? The older officer asked. To you or your father? I thought about the way Daniel once grabbed my wrist at Thanksgiving when I took away his keys because he'd had too much to drink. I thought about the hole in Dad's drywall from the time they argued about politics. Not in a way that left marks, I said. But he has a temper. He's very good at using his words as weapons. Has he ever talked about wanting control of your father's assets? Mark asked. Constantly, I said. He's obsessed with the house. Talks about how sad it is that we're letting it fall apart by not renting it out or selling it. Like Dad's life is an investment portfolio. Mark sighed. Okay, he said. Here's where we're at. Your brother called the non-emergency line and then the crisis line multiple times this week, alleging that you're decompensating, that you've been talking to yourself, hoarding your father, and that your father is covered in bruises and afraid to speak around you. He said he tried to talk to you and you screamed like a crazy person and hung up. My cheeks burned. I hung up because he called me unhinged, I said. And I am talking to myself sometimes because the only adult in this house with a functioning brain is my husband, and he works nights. He also said, Mark continued, that you told him you'd rather your father die under your roof than let him go to some place where other people can get their hands on him. I stared at him. I said, I replied, enunciating each word, that I wanted Dad to die in a place where he knew the curtains and the smell of the coffee and the sound of the dishwasher, not in some fluorescent-lit room with strangers. I said I wouldn't ship him off just to make myself more comfortable. That was before I realized maybe a facility with staff would be kinder to both of us. Mark nodded. I believe you, he said. But you need to understand that when we get calls like that, multiple calls, we have to check. The law doesn't allow us to just ignore it. In some cases, if we find credible evidence, we can place someone on a psychiatric hold for 72 hours for evaluation. Is that what you're doing? I whispered. Are you going to take me? He looked around my kitchen, at the clean counters, at the stack of Dad's crossword puzzles, at my son trying to look brave in the doorway. Then he did something I will never forget. He slid his notepad closed. No, he said. No one here is going anywhere tonight. I sagged against the counter, my legs weak. You're clearly tired, he added, and you could use more support. But you're oriented, you're not psychotic, you're not intoxicated, and your father does not appear to be in immediate danger. If anything, I'm more concerned about the stress you're under than any risk you pose. The woman in scrubs nodded. I'd be happy to give you some resources for caregiver support groups, she said. There are respite programs, grants. You shouldn't have to do this alone. Tears pricked my eyes. Someone was finally saying the thing I'd been screaming inside my own head for 2 years. Thank you, I said hoarsely. I'd like that. The older officer cleared his throat. We will be documenting that we came out and found no evidence of abuse or neglect, he said, and we'll make note of the possible malicious nature of the report. That's not a criminal matter in itself, but it does help if there are future calls. Future calls, I repeated. You think he'll do this again? People who use the system like this rarely stop the first time, Mark said. But the more documentation we have, the less credibility he has. As if summoned by our words, my phone buzzed on the counter. Daniel. FaceTime. I let it ring. Then I picked it up, flipped to speaker and set it down. Hey. His voice came through, all false concern. Just checking in. Has anyone been by yet? I'm really worried, Claire. You sounded so off on the phone. Hi, Daniel, Mark said calmly, leaning toward the phone. This is Mark with the County Crisis Response Team. I'm here with your sister and your father right now. There was a beat of stunned silence. Oh, Daniel said. Wow. Already? I'm so glad you came. You could hear the smile in his voice. She's been under so much stress. We've completed our assessment, Mark cut in. We have no concerns about Claire's mental state or your father's safety at this time. The home is clean, your father is well cared for, and your sister has appropriate insight into the stressors she's under. We will be closing this call as unfounded. Another pause. Then sharp. Did she get to you? Daniel demanded. She's very manipulative. She knows how to put on a good show. You should talk to her neighbors. They've heard. We've spoken with Ms. Bennett and her family, Mark said. We've also reviewed some documentation regarding financial concerns and previous unfounded neglect reports. At this point, our primary recommendation is increased support for your father's care and possibly some family counseling if you're interested. Daniel laughed ugly. Family counseling, he sneered. With her? She's the problem, not me. Be that as it may, Mark said, unruffled. Unless you have new information that suggests imminent danger, further misuse of emergency services can itself become an issue. I'd encourage you to work out your family disagreements in an appropriate setting. Unbelievable, Daniel snapped. She's got everyone snowed. She always has. Then he hung up. The silence left behind felt heavy and vibrating. Well, I said finally, that was fun. The crisis team left. The lights vanished from the window. My neighbor's curtains stopped twitching. My father, who had apparently forgotten the whole thing the second the commercials ended, yelled from the living room, Claire wins dinner? I made chicken and rice with hands that shook. My son hovered. Are they going to take Uncle Dan to jail? He asked. Probably not, I said. Unfortunately, being an ass isn't illegal. It should be, Evan said. I slept badly that night. Every time a car drove by, I jolted awake. Sure, it was someone else coming to question my competence. In the morning, I called my therapist and my lawyer friend in that order. My therapist listened, said, I am so sorry, and then, this is exactly the kind of escalation we talked about if you continued to hold boundaries around your father's money. My lawyer friend listened, swore creatively, and then said, we need to get ahead of this legally. How? I asked. He's already tried APS and the crisis line. What's next? A billboard. Next is court, she said. If he's serious about wanting control, he may try to petition for guardianship and paint you as unfit. The good news is you have a solid paper trail. The bad news is it will be hell on your nervous system. Can I opt out? I asked weakly. Not if you want to keep protecting your dad, she said gently. I hung up and went to check on Dad, who was happily circling newspaper obituaries with a pen as if it were a game. Look, Claire, he said. We outlived another one. Ha! That's dark, Dad, I said, kissing his head. That's life, he shrugged. You die or you don't. Until you do. 2 months later, my lawyer friend was proven right. Daniel filed a petition in probate court alleging that I was abusing my position as power of attorney, isolating Dad from his loving son, and mismanaging assets to benefit herself. He requested that the court remove me as POA and appoint him instead, or failing that, a third-party guardian. He attached an affidavit full of lies that I'd refused to let him see Dad. I had asked him to call before showing up drunk, that I'd blocked his number, I'd silenced it after 2 a.m. calls, that I'd spent down Dad's savings on doctors, medications, and a wheelchair. If you've never read a court document where your life is described in the worst possible light, let me tell you, it's surreal. It's like seeing yourself in a funhouse mirror, warped, distorted, but still recognizably you. I wanted to crawl under a rock. Instead, I gathered my binder, now 2 binders, and walked into court. The hearing was about as awful as you'd expect. Daniel arrived in a suit that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, with a lawyer I recognized from his Christmas card bragging about family law victories. I arrived with my plain black blazer, my inhaler, and my friend from law school who did elder law on the side because she couldn't stand what people did to old folks. My dad came with a court-appointed advocate. He wore his good shirt and his confusion like armor. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes, listened to opening statements. Daniel's lawyer painted him as the concerned son, tragically pushed aside by his controlling sister who'd always had an issue with sharing their father's love. My lawyer painted me as the primary caregiver doing her best in an impossible situation, with documented support from doctors and social workers. Then they called me to the stand. "Ms. Bennett," Daniel's lawyer said, "is it true that you once told your brother you'd rather your father die under your roof than in some facility?" "Yes," I said, in the context of a conversation about wanting him to be in a familiar environment in his final days. I have since accepted that a memory care unit may be necessary when his needs outstrip my abilities. Is it true that Adult Protective Services investigated you for neglect?" "Yes," I said, "and they found no evidence of neglect or abuse. The report was closed as unfounded. The letter is in Exhibit C." We went back and forth like that for what felt like hours. Every tired text I'd ever sent, every sarcastic joke about losing my mind, was laid out and examined. It was humiliating. It was also clarifying. Because for every half-truth Daniel's lawyer presented, we had a whole truth to counter it. Doctor's notes praising my diligence, social worker reports, the crisis team's write-up from the night Daniel called. At one point, the judge held up a printout of my color-coded care schedule. "You made this?" she asked. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "I work part-time from home, my husband works nights, and my children have school. I needed a way to make sure someone was always here when my father was awake." She studied it. "It's more organized than my chambers," she muttered, to a ripple of laughter in the courtroom. When it was Daniel's turn, my lawyer asked him about the bank transfers. "Did you receive $1,000 from your father's account on March 3rd? "Yes," he said smoothly. "He offered to help me with car repairs." "Did he understand what he was signing?" she pressed. "Of course," Daniel said. "He's not incompetent. But you are alleging he's incompetent enough that your sister should be removed as POA," she said. "So which is it?" He bristled. "He has good days and bad days," he snapped. "On good days, he knows what he's doing. On bad days, she takes advantage. Do you have any evidence that Ms. Bennett has taken a dime from her father's accounts for her personal use?" my lawyer asked. He opened his mouth, closed it. "It's obvious," he said finally. "She lives in a bigger house than we grew up in. She cut back her work hours. Where do you think that money comes from?" "My husband's overtime," I said under my breath. The judge heard. "Mr. Bishop," she said, "speculation is not evidence. Do you have bank records? Receipts? Anything showing misappropriation?" He flushed. "No," he admitted. "Just common sense." "Common sense," she said dryly, "is not admissible." Then came the moment I both dreaded and needed. The judge called my father to the stand. Watching him shuffle up there, supported by his advocate, my heart broke all over again. He took the oath, his hand shaking, and sat down. "Mr. Bennett," the judge said gently, "do you understand why you're here today?" "Because my kids are fighting," he said. Laughter rippled again, softer this time. "That's about the size of it," the judge said. "Do you know who your power of attorney is?" "Claire is," he said promptly. He pointed at me. Relief flooded me so hard I had to grip my chair. "And when did you sign that?" she asked. "Couple years before my head went fuzzy," he said. "Doc told me to. Said I should pick somebody who'd make sure I didn't do anything stupid." "Why did you pick Claire?" the judge asked. He shrugged. "She's the one who pays attention," he said. "Always has been. Since she was a little thing making charts for her chores. Danny," he trailed off, brow furrowing. "Danny's a good boy," he added automatically. "But he's not a details guy. Do you trust Claire to handle your finances and health decisions?" the judge asked. "Long as she listens to the doctors, yeah," he said. "She's bossy as hell, but she keeps the lights on." The courtroom chuckled. The judge smiled. "And do you feel safe living with her?" she asked. "Has she ever hurt you?" Dad looked genuinely confused. "Hurt me?" he repeated. "No. She yells sometimes when I pee on the floor, but I'd yell too." He squinted at Daniel. "He's the one who punched a hole in my wall," he added, apropos of nothing. Daniel went pale. "Dad," he hissed. "We talked about that." "You did it," Dad insisted, more lucid than I'd seen him in months. "You and your big man temper. Claire patched it with that goo stuff. She's handy." The judge's eyebrows climbed so high they nearly left her face. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett," she said. "You can sit down." After deliberating for an agonizing 20 minutes, she returned with her decision. "Having reviewed the evidence and testimony," she said, "this court finds no basis to remove Miss Claire Bennett as her father's power of attorney. On the contrary, the court commends her for the level of care she has provided under difficult circumstances. Mr. Daniel Bishop's petition is denied." I exhaled, shaking. The judge wasn't done. "Furthermore," she said, "given the apparent conflict between the siblings, I strongly recommend that Mr. Bennett's assets be placed in a managed trust with a neutral third-party trustee to prevent future disputes. If that hasn't already been done, I suggest Ms. Bennett speak with an elder law attorney." My lawyer stood. "Your Honor," she said, "if I may, Mr. Bennett executed a revocable living trust 2 years ago, before his diagnosis. The house and remaining savings are already held there. The trustee is his longtime accountant." Daniel's head whipped toward her. "What?" he said. "When?" My lawyer handed a document to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. She skimmed it. "Indeed," she said. "It appears Mr. Bennett was more proactive than either of you realized. The trustee will handle financial disbursements according to the terms of the trust. This court sees no reason to interfere." Daniel rounded on me in the hallway afterward. His face twisted with rage I recognized from childhood tantrums. "You knew," he hissed. "You knew about this trust and you didn't tell me." "I found out when we filed our response," I said. "Dad and his accountant did it before he got bad. I guess Mom's death scared him enough to listen to someone other than you for once." "This is your doing," he said. "You poisoned him against me." "No," I said. "Your actions did that. You took his money without asking. You tried to have his caregiver declared insane. You punched a hole in his wall. He might forget what he had for breakfast, but apparently he remembers that." Daniel laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Enjoy your little victory," he said. "When he's gone, you're going to be all alone in that house with your charts and your guilt while everyone knows you stole my inheritance." "It was never your inheritance," I said quietly. "It was his money, his house, his choice." "You're dead to me," he spat. "Then we're even," I said. "You've been dead to me since the night you sent the cops to my door." He flinched just slightly. Then he walked away. We haven't spoken since. It's been a year. In that time, Dad has declined further. He no longer knows I'm his daughter consistently. Sometimes I'm the nice lady who brings the good soup. Sometimes I'm my mother, sometimes I'm nobody at all. The trust, managed by his accountant, pays for a part-time home health aide 3 days a week now. That extra help has been the difference between me functioning and me dissolving. The crisis team never came back. Adult Protective Services hasn't called again. The only time we see a uniform at our door is when teenagers are setting off fireworks in July. My kids know more about power of attorney, guardianship, and elder abuse than most adults. They also know intimately what love looks like when it's not pretty or easy. They watched me bathe their grandfather, argue with insurance companies, sit on the floor and cry after hard days, then get up and make dinner anyway. They watched their uncle try to weaponize the system against us and saw it fail at least this time. Sometimes when I'm up at 3 a.m. changing dad's sheets, I hear my mother's voice in my head saying, "Family is all you have in the end." It used to comfort me. Now I hear it and think, no. Family is who acts like family. Blood is just paperwork. I still feel guilty. Of course I do. That's the fun souvenir of being raised in a house where every boundary was treated as an attack. I feel guilty for cutting off contact with my only sibling. I feel guilty that Dad sometimes asks where Danny is and I say, "He's busy, Dad." Because I don't know how to explain that his son would rather fight over the house than visit the man who built it. I feel guilty that I am sometimes angry at a man whose brain is literally dissolving. I feel guilty that I fantasize about the quiet that will come when this chapter is over. But I also feel something I didn't expect. Relief. Relief that there is a paper trail that shows I did my best. Relief that a judge looked at my life and said, "You're doing okay." Relief that my brother's narrative is, at least in some official places, marked as what it is, self-serving noise. So that's where I'm at, internet strangers. My brother tried to have me dragged out of my own house under the guise of concern, so he could paint me as crazy and get control of our father's assets. It backfired. Legally, I'm still Dad's POA. Practically, the trust and the accountant keep both of us honest. Emotionally, my family of origin is shattered. My husband says we're better off without Daniel's toxicity. My therapist says I chose safety over dysfunction. My father on his lucid days says, "You're a good kid," and that has to be enough. But I still lie awake sometimes wondering, what would you have done in my place? If your sibling started calling social services and the cops, telling them you were crazy and dangerous just because you refused to let them raid your elderly parents' savings, would you keep trying to fix the relationship for the sake of family? Or would you do what I did, build your paper shield, let the system see the truth, and then walk away from the person who tried to destroy you, even if that person shares your last name and your childhood bedroom memories?